The massive crystal dome of the Galactic Council chambers glowed with an eerie blue light as hundreds of representatives from different species filled the circular hall. Emergency alarms had drawn them from their quarters in the middle of the night cycle. The air buzzed with worried whispers and confused murmurs. Admiral Gray sat quietly in the human section, his weathered face showing no emotion. At 60 Earth years old, he had seen enough battles to know when a storm was coming. Around him, alien representatives from over 200 worlds shifted nervously in their seats. Some had tentacles, others had wings, and a few were merely floating clouds of gas. But all of them kept glancing at the human section with poorly hidden concern. The Grand Speaker, a tall being with silver skin that reflected the chamber's light, raised all four of their arms for silence. The whispers died immediately. "We have called this emergency session." The Grand Speaker's voice boomed through the chamber, "because of disturbing reports from the outer colonies. What we are about to show you has caused great concern among our military advisors." The center of the chamber darkened, and a hologram sprang to life. It showed a space battle, but unlike any the Council had seen before. A single human vessel, small and seemingly outdated, faced off against 12 pirate ships. The pirates were using top-grade military equipment, stolen from various species. The Council members watched in stunned silence as the human ship did something unexpected. Instead of running or fighting conventionally, it launched what appeared to be garbage into space. The pirate ship's advanced sensors ignored the debris, focusing on the human vessel itself. That was their first mistake. The garbage turned out to be hundreds of small mines, disguised as space junk. But that wasn't the clever part. The human ship then fired on its own mines, creating a chain reaction that turned the entire debris field into a superheated plasma cloud. The pirate ships, with their expensive energy shields designed to stop normal weapons, found their defenses useless against the improvised attack. This footage was taken 3 days ago near the Wilson colony. The Grand Speaker continued as the hologram showed the pirates retreating in chaos, several of their ships badly damaged. The human vessel was a simple patrol boat with a crew of just 15. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and using outdated equipment. Yet they succeeded in driving off forces that should have easily destroyed them. Admiral Gray noticed many council members turning to stare at him again. He kept his face carefully neutral, but inside he felt a hint of pride. That patrol boat captain had used their head, just as they'd been trained. This is not an isolated incident. The Grand Speaker's voice grew more serious. In the past month alone, we have recorded 23 similar encounters. Each time, human forces have demonstrated combat techniques that completely ignore standard military doctrine. They turn weaknesses into strengths. They use civilian equipment as weapons. They employ tactics that our military analysts call insane yet somehow prove effective. The chamber erupted in worried discussions. A representative of the crystalline worlds, their bodies shimmering with anxiety, stood up to speak. How can they even think of such strategies? They asked, their translator struggling to convey their distress. Every spacefaring race knows the proper ways of combat. There are rules, traditions, established patterns that have worked for thousands of years. These humans, they fight like barbarians. Admiral Gray finally allowed himself a small smile. He knew what these aliens didn't understand. Humans had spent their entire history fighting other humans. They had learned to expect the unexpected, to improvise, to think around corners. Space warfare wasn't changing them. They were changing space warfare. The Grand Speaker raised their arms again for silence. We have more evidence to present. But first, we must discuss a serious question. Should humans be classified as a dangerous species requiring special monitoring? As the debate began to heat up, Admiral Gray settled deeper into his chair. It was going to be a long night, but at least it wouldn't be boring. He just hoped these well-meaning aliens would understand that trying to contain humanity's potential for warfare might be the most dangerous move of all. 6 months earlier, the human patrol ship Star Wanderer drifted quietly through the darkness of space. Commander Thomas stood on the bridge, his eyes fixed on the blinking red light on his control panel. The distress signal had been repeating for the last 10 minutes. "Any identification on that signal, Peters?" Thomas asked his communications officer. "It's not human, sir," Peters replied, adjusting her headset. "But the pattern matches registered merchant codes from the trading worlds." "They're in trouble." Thomas nodded slowly. This would be their first real contact with alien life in distress. Until now, most interactions had been carefully planned diplomatic meetings. He knew his next decision could affect how aliens viewed humanity for years to come. "How far to their location?" 20 minutes at full speed, sir," the navigation officer reported. "But our sensors show 3 larger ships surrounding the merchant vessel. They're probably raiders." Thomas walked to the main viewport, his hands clasped behind his back. The Star Wanderer was a small ship with a crew of 30. They carried standard weapons, but nothing that could match 3 raider vessels. Protocol said they should wait for backup. But people were in danger. Thomas had never been good at following protocol when lives were at stake. "What mining equipment do we still have in the cargo hold?" he asked suddenly. His crew looked confused. The Star Wanderer had been helping set up mining operations on a nearby colony last week. They still had some equipment on board. 3 industrial drills and about 50 survey charges, sir, the cargo officer answered. "We were supposed to drop them off next week." Thomas smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Perfect. Here's what we're going to do." 20 minutes later, the raiders were surprised to see a single human ship approaching boldly. They had heard of humans, but had never fought them. The raiders' leader laughed at the small vessel coming straight at them. Their ships were bigger, stronger, and carried enough weapons to destroy a small fleet. The human ship launched what looked like escape pods. The raiders ignored them, focusing their weapons on the approaching vessel. That was exactly what Thomas had hoped for. The escape pods were actually mining drills, each loaded with survey charges. The drills had been designed to cut through asteroids. Now they spun through space, their powerful motors aimed at the raiders' ships. "They're powering up their main guns," Peters reported calmly. "Shields at maximum." "Wait for it," Thomas ordered. He watched as the drills got closer to their targets. The raiders still hadn't noticed them, their sensors programmed to ignore small objects to avoid space debris, false alarms. The first drill slammed into the lead raider ship's hull. Industrial-grade drilling equipment, designed to cut through solid rock, tore into the ship's outer plating. The survey charges, normally used to test asteroid density, exploded inside the ship. Chaos erupted among the raiders. They had expected a normal space battle with proper weapons. Instead, they found their ships being torn apart by mining equipment. Their shields, calibrated to stop energy weapons and missiles, did nothing against the physical drills. "Target their engines with our main guns," Thomas ordered. "They'll be too busy with our little surprises to dodge properly." The Star Wanderer's conventional weapons now came into play, hitting the confused and damaged raiders with deadly accuracy. Within minutes, 2 raider ships were drifting helplessly in space. The third turned and fled, leaving their companions behind. When it was over, Thomas contacted the merchant ship. The aliens aboard were safe but shocked. They had never seen anyone use mining equipment as weapons before. When Thomas offered to escort them to the nearest safe port, they agreed quickly, both grateful and slightly afraid. Later that day, Thomas filed his report about the incident. He didn't think much of it at the time. He had simply done what any human commander would do: use whatever tools were available to protect the innocent. He didn't know that his report would eventually reach the Galactic Council, becoming one of many examples that would make the galaxy reconsider their view of humanity. Ambassador Reed stood before the Council's military committee, trying to hide his frustration. For 3 hours, he had been attempting to explain human military history to the gathered aliens. It wasn't going well. "Let me understand this correctly," said the defense minister of the Crystal Worlds, his crystalline body flashing with confusion. "You're saying that humans once defeated superior forces by dropping trees on them?" "Yes," Reed replied patiently. During our history, armies often used the environment as a weapon. The Vietnamese fighters used their knowledge of the jungle to defeat much stronger armies. They dug tunnels, set traps, and fought in ways their enemies didn't expect. The committee room fell silent. Reed could see the alien representatives sending worried glances to each other. He had thought examples from human history would help them understand humanity better. Instead, each example seemed to make them more nervous. And this, guerrilla warfare, another committee member spoke up, their tentacles waving in agitation. You say it's not about actual guerrillas. No, Reed explained. It's a style of fighting where smaller forces use surprise attacks and quick retreats to wear down larger armies. The name just means little war in an old human language. But that's not proper warfare, protested a third member, their metallic scales rattling. War should be conducted on open fields, with both sides agreeing to battle. There should be formations, proper weapons, and clear rules of engagement. Reed rubbed his temples. How could he make them understand? Humans learned to fight differently because we had to. When you're outgunned, outnumbered, or facing an enemy with better technology, you have to get creative. He brought up a holographic display showing various human conflicts through history. Look at how we adapted. When enemies had better weapons, we used the landscape. When they had better armor, we found weak points. When they had bigger armies, we changed how we fought. The military committee watched in growing horror as Reed showed them humans turning simple tools into weapons, using weather to their advantage, and coming up with unexpected solutions to military problems. And you brought these methods into space? Asked the defense minister, their crystal form now glowing a worried shade of orange. Of course, Reed nodded. It's part of who we are. Humans look at every situation and ask, what do we have? And how can we use it? That's why Commander Thomas used mining equipment against those raiders. He used what he had available. One of the younger committee members, who had been quiet until now, suddenly spoke up. I've been studying the reports. Humans don't just adapt their weapons. They accept casualties in ways our species cannot understand. They call it acceptable losses. Reed sighed. This was the hardest part to explain. Humans will risk their lives to save others or complete important missions. We don't want to die, but we're willing to sacrifice ourselves if necessary. The committee room erupted in shocked whispers. The idea of deliberately risking death was alien to most species. Their civilizations had evolved to avoid any unnecessary losses. I think we've heard enough, the defense minister said finally. Ambassador Reed, we thank you for this enlightening presentation. The committee needs to discuss this privately. As Reed left the room, he heard one committee member say, they use anything as a weapon, ignore proper battle protocols, and actually plan for losses. How do we defend against species like that? Reed smiled slightly as the door closed behind him. They were asking the wrong question. The real question wasn't how to defend against humans. It was how to make humans your allies. But they weren't ready to understand that yet. Intelligence Officer Marcus stood calmly in the center of the council chamber, surrounded by rising tiers of seats filled with agitated alien representatives. Above him, massive screens showed images from Earth's military history, each one making the council members more uncomfortable. As you can see, Marcus said, pointing to a picture of ancient Greek warriors, humans have been developing military tactics for thousands of years. These soldiers used a formation called a phalanx, where they locked their shields together to become nearly unstoppable. But they fought their own kind, called out a floating gas cloud representative. How can a species advance if they spend so much time fighting themselves? Marcus changed the image to show modern military vehicles. Fighting ourselves taught us to innovate. When someone built stronger armor, we developed better weapons. When they made faster vehicles, we created new ways to stop them. Each war pushed us to improve. The council members watched as Marcus showed them how human warfare had evolved. From swords to guns, from horses to tanks, from planes to spaceships. But it wasn't the weapons that scared them most. It was the human ability to adapt. "Here's what concerns us most," said the council leader, their scaled skin shifting colors with worry. "In every report, humans show complete disregard for standard combat protocols. Just last week, a human ship escaped pirates by flying into an asteroid field." Marcus nodded. Yes, that was clever. The human captain knew most species would never follow because their artificial intelligence systems wouldn't let them take such risks. He used their safety protocols against them. "That's exactly our point," the council leader exclaimed. "No sane species would risk their lives like that. We must vote on classifying humans as a dangerous species. Their unpredictable behavior threatens the stability of the galaxy." The chamber erupted in loud debate. Some representatives agreed humans were too dangerous. Others argued that humanity's creative thinking could be valuable. In the middle of it all, Marcus waited patiently. Finally, he raised his hand for attention. "Before you vote, let me show you one more thing." He changed the display to show human rescue workers. These are humans risking their lives to save others. The same creativity we use in war, we also use to protect and help. The images continued. Firefighters running into burning buildings, doctors fighting diseases, astronauts making emergency repairs in space. "Yes, we can be dangerous," Marcus admitted, "but only to those who threaten the innocent. The same human who might use mining tools as weapons would also risk their life to save an alien child." A quiet fell over the chamber as the council considered this. The leader's scales shifted to a thoughtful blue color. "You make an interesting point, Officer Marcus. But it doesn't change the fact that humans approach combat in ways we can't predict." "True," Marcus agreed. "But consider this. Would you rather have unpredictable humans as enemies or allies? Because trying to restrict us will only guarantee the first option." The council chamber grew very quiet. Marcus's words weren't a threat. They were a simple statement of fact. Humans would always find ways around restrictions. It was their nature to adapt and overcome. "I propose we delay the vote," said a representative from the Elder Worlds, speaking for the first time. "Perhaps we need to reconsider our definition of dangerous. A species that can turn anything into a weapon, yet chooses to use that ability to protect others, might be exactly what this galaxy needs." As the council members began discussing this new perspective, Marcus allowed himself a small smile. They were finally asking the right questions. The real danger wasn't what humans could do in battle. It was assuming you could predict what they would do at all. Lieutenant West looked at the holographic map floating in front of her team. The council had called this a simple training exercise, but something felt off. The testing chamber around them was too large, too well-equipped to be just for training. "Remember," said the alien instructor, his blue scales glowing softly, "this is only a simulation. Your goal is to reach the other side of the chamber while following standard military protocols. The computer will generate appropriate challenges." West glanced at her 4 team members. They were the first humans invited to demonstrate their combat skills at the Council's military academy. It was supposed to be an honor. It felt more like a test. "Beginning simulation in 3, 2, 1, the instructor announced. The massive chamber transformed around them. Holographic walls created a maze-like structure. Training robots, armed with stun weapons, appeared at various points. It looked like a standard combat course. "Move out," West ordered. Her team formed the textbook defensive formation they had been taught. For the first few minutes, everything went according to the Council's protocols. They advanced carefully, dealt with threats methodically, and followed all the rules. Then the lights flickered. "Warning," the computer's voice echoed through the chamber. "System malfunction detected. Safety protocols disengage. Threat level increased." The alien instructor's scales turned pale. "This isn't supposed to happen. We need to shut it down." But before he could reach the controls, the training robots changed. Their weapons switched from stun to full power. Their movements became more aggressive. The holographic walls started shifting unpredictably. "Sir, you need to leave," West told the instructor calmly. "We'll handle this." "But the robots are now at military combat level," the instructor protested. "This simulation is using real military algorithms. It's too dangerous." West smiled. "Perfect. Now we can stop pretending." Her team immediately abandoned the formal formation. They split up, each soldier moving in what looked like random patterns. The instructor watched in horror as they broke every rule of proper combat he had taught them. One soldier used his belt to tie two robot arms together, making them shoot each other. Another figured out that the holographic walls still had solid light projectors at their bases. She started kicking them over, disrupting the maze pattern, and confusing the robot's navigation systems. West herself found the maintenance panels hidden in the walls. Instead of fighting through the maze, she started rerouting power circuits, causing sections of the chamber to shut down. The robots in those sections froze, their power supply cut off. "This is impossible," the instructor exclaimed. "You're not following any known combat protocols." "That's the point," West replied as she worked. "Humans don't just follow protocols. We adapt. The robots are programmed to counter standard military tactics, but there's nothing standard about us." Her team regrouped, using the chaos they had created to their advantage. The robots, programmed for traditional warfare, couldn't adjust to enemies who ignored the rules. Within minutes, the humans had reached their objective. As the simulation powered down, the chamber's main doors opened. A group of Council military observers walked in, their expressions unreadable. "You knew the system would malfunction," West said, looking at them. "This wasn't about testing our combat skills. You wanted to see how we would react to unexpected danger." The lead observer nodded. "We needed to understand how humans perform under real pressure. The results are concerning." "No," West corrected him. "The results are human. We don't just overcome challenges. We change the rules of the game. The sooner the Council understands that, the better." As her team left the chamber, West heard the observers discussing urgently among themselves. She knew their report would only add to the Council's worries about humanity, but maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. Sometimes, being underestimated was the greatest advantage of all. The Council's document-writing chamber was silent except for the soft hum of floating data screens. 12 of the galaxy's most experienced military minds sat around a massive table, working on what would become the most unusual warning ever issued by the Galactic Council. "How do we even begin to describe humans in combat?" asked General Vax, his crystalline form flickering with frustration. "Every time we think we understand their limits, they surprise us." The head writer, an ancient being named Mentor, studied the reports floating before him. "Perhaps we should start with what we know for certain, the facts that no one can deny." The screens lit up as he began to type. "Official Galactic KONCL warning. Subdigicity. Human combat TAP abilities. Helaification. Urgent. All species. The following information must be distributed to all military forces in the galaxy. Engaging human forces in combat is not recommended for the following reasons. 1. Humans do not follow predictable patterns in battle. What appears to be a retreat may be a trap. What looks like a weakness may be deliberately planned. 2. Human weapons are not limited to designated combat tools. They have demonstrated the ability to turn mining equipment, construction machinery, and even cleaning devices into deadly weapons. 3. Human battle strategies ignore traditional military logic. They will hide their strongest ships behind their weakest. They will sacrifice valuable equipment to gain tactical advantages. They will deliberately enter dangerous situations that other species' safety protocols would forbid." General Vax interrupted. "Add their disturbing ability to function under extreme stress. I watched a human crew repair their ship's engine while under heavy fire. They were laughing while they did it." Mentor nodded and added, 4. Humans demonstrate increased efficiency in crisis situations. Standard tactics of creating stress and fear may actually improve their combat performance. 5. Human crews will intentionally damage their own ships or equipment if they believe it will give them an advantage. This makes their actions impossible to predict using standard combat algorithms. Another council member spoke up. Don't forget what happened in the proving ground. We must warn them about human adaptability. More points appeared on the screens. 6. Humans can instantly change tactics upon discovering new information. Training simulations show they can create and implement new strategies in the middle of combat. 7. Human military forces operate effectively even when cut off from command. Individual human ships or units will continue fighting and completing objectives without orders from superiors. 8. Humans show no hesitation in using their environment as a weapon. They will use asteroids, solar radiation, gravity wells, and even Admiral Gray stood at the window of his new office in the Galactic Military Academy, watching alien students practicing human combat techniques in the courtyard below. 6 months had passed since the Council's warning, and nothing had turned out quite the way anyone expected. Another request for human military advisors. Sir, his assistant said, placing a datapad on his desk. The trading worlds want help training their defense forces. Gray smiled. The Council's warning about humans had backfired in the most remarkable way. Instead of making other species avoid humans, it had made them desperately curious. The detailed list of human combat capabilities had read less like a warning and more like an advertisement. Did you see the latest enrollment numbers? Gray asked, turning from the window. We have students from 30 different species now. Last month, it was only 20. The assistant nodded. Yes, sir. And there's a waiting list for the Human Creative Combat class. Everyone wants to learn how we turn ordinary items into weapons. Down in the courtyard, an instructor was teaching alien soldiers how to use their surroundings to their advantage. The concept seemed to both frighten and fascinate them. Many species had spent thousands of years developing strict rules of combat, only to learn that humans had spent the same time figuring out how to break those rules. Commander Thomas is here to see you. Sir, the assistant announced. He's just returned from his diplomatic mission to the crystalline worlds. Thomas walked in, looking amused. His recent fame as the mining equipment warrior had made him a popular figure among alien military students. The story of how he had defeated raiders with mining tools had become required reading at the academy. How did it go? Gray asked. Better than expected, Thomas replied. They've officially requested of a permanent human military presence in their sector. Not because they're afraid of us, but because they're afraid of everyone else. Gray raised an eyebrow. Explain. Well, sir, they figure that since everyone knows about human combat capabilities now, the best defense is to have humans on their side. They've even started modifying their ships to allow for human creative solutions in combat. A message flashed on Gray's screen. Another report from Ambassador Reed. More species were requesting human presence in their defense forces. The Council's attempt to label humans as dangerous had instead established them as valuable allies. Sir, the assistant interrupted. The Council's Grand Speaker is asking for an urgent meeting. They want to discuss expanding the human section of the Academy. Gray laughed softly. Just months ago, the Council had debated whether humans should be classified as a dangerous species. Now they wanted humans to teach their methods to others. Looking out the window again, he watched an alien instructor demonstrating how humans used unpredictability as a tactical advantage. The students were fully engaged, their various appendages taking notes eagerly. You know what the real irony is, Thomas said, joining him at the window. We're actually creating peace. Species that might have fought each other are now too busy trying to understand how humans think. Gray nodded. The Council's warning had done more than just spread fear of human combat abilities. It had sparked genuine interest in understanding human thinking. Species that once saw humans as primitive or barbaric now sought to learn from them. Send word to the Council, Gray told his assistant. Tell them I'd be happy to discuss expanding the Academy. But first, Ask them if they've noticed something interesting. Since we started teaching here, pirate attacks in this sector have dropped by 60%. As the assistant left, Gray watched a group of alien students attempting to solve a combat puzzle using human methods. They were learning that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their ability to fight. It was their ability to think differently. The Council's warning about humans in battle had tried to tell the galaxy to be afraid. Instead, it had taught the galaxy to be curious. And in the end, that curiosity had created something the Council never expected: a more stable, peaceful galaxy, united by its fascination with the species it had once feared.